Something I was thinking about was that it's really important to have a big yes in your life. Something bigger than yourself that's important, that puts all the other stuff into your life in proper perspective. So sometimes this happens when people die, or when there's some kind of tremendous loss that you suffer in your life. Something really edgy happens, where you might lose everything. And then you start to not sweat the small stuff. Old people are happier than young people. In happiness studies, they do. And there's different theories about why that might be, but I think the prevailing theory is that old people realize they just don't have that long to live. And so they can't afford to sweat the small stuff, so they tend to be, just a little less caught up on trivial stuff and a little more focused on the important big stuff in life. In general, I think happiness is overrated. I think meaning trumps happiness every day of the week. Happiness is relatively easy to manufacture. Euphoria, oxytocin dumps, dopamine hits, they're relatively easy to manufacture. And so what most people would describe as being happiness is pretty shallow. I think meaning and purpose adds a lot more value to life, runs a lot deeper, steadies you and sees you through difficult times. And if we wanted to say there's the word happiness, the word love, these terms have such a broad meaning in English. They're used in such a variety of ways. And so we could maybe separate the word happiness into deep and abiding happiness, or profound happiness, or transcendent happiness, or happiness with a capital H, real happiness, whatever way you wanted to distinguish this type of happiness from ephemeral, transient, shallow, here today, gone tomorrow happiness. And so I would say that purpose and meaning is the key to unlocking the deeper, more real, more permanent, more powerful, more transformative happiness. And that's powerful enough where you could be miserable to some extent in your life and also be profoundly happy and grateful and filled with joy and meaning. And so I think really what most people should do, just as their basic program in life, is they should focus on purpose and meaning. Let happiness take care of itself. And instead of focusing on shallow, will-o'-the-wisp, phantasmagoric happiness, they should focus on depth and meaning. Figure out what's important, what you value, what you'd be willing to die for, even more deep, what you'd be willing to live for, and then dedicate yourself to that higher purpose, being a part of something larger than yourself. It's the single biggest ingredient in happiness. When they do happiness studies, this is what makes people happy. People stay at jobs where they make less money because they feel like they're part of something that they're needed, that they add value. And so religion traditionally provides people with really serious, profound purpose, that you're part of something much bigger than yourself, infinitely bigger than yourself. But this idea, whatever you attach yourself to, living for something bigger than yourself, living for something profound, being a part of something profound, is the cure for selfishness and self-absorption and narcissism and shallowness and sensuality and weakness of character and everything else under the sun that vexes and confounds people and, disturbs their life in any number of ways on a daily basis. And if you got something really important going on, it's like if you're saving somebody's life, you pick up a car off of somebody, Or if you're protecting somebody, sometimes you injure yourself really badly. Like guys who are like in fights, sometimes they'll injure themselves really badly. One Muay Thai fighter I really like, who trains out of Pleasanton, California, he got elbowed, got a spinning back elbow, which is a really powerful strike. Because all the force of spinning, and it's your elbow, which is already ridiculously hard and almost indestructible. You can hit your elbow against almost anything else on the planet, and you're just going to destroy the thing you hit. And so he got his jaw broken in 2 places and his teeth knocked out. He got hit with a spinning elbow. And he was like, so then I knew I had to win the fight. And then he like went and knocked the guy out like 20 seconds later. He was like, I couldn't take any more damage. I had to turn up the heat and go for broke. And he knocked the guy out. With a jaw broken in 2 places and his teeth knocked out 8 seconds before. So when people like, they have something to fight for, they become relatively impervious to pain. Whereas otherwise a hangnail might like bring you to your knees and just be like something that you just is just totally ruining your day. Because there's something real and immediate and important and dangerous and powerful and it just everything else just fades away. We need to not just wait for life to throw massive tragedies our way to wake us up. We need to go ahead and use our incredibly powerful ability to think, to deeply contemplate our existence and what's important and what we want to live for and what's worth dying for. And like I said, even more dangerous and powerful, what's worth living for. And then we need to find that and anchor ourselves to that. And then you'll have happiness on speed dial all day, every day, even when you're going through difficult times, even when things are reversed against you, even when there's some painful, disastrous thing happening. You'll still be connected to something greater than yourself, and you'll find strength and joy, and you won't get shaken. And in general, none of you have this. Like, I don't mean to be harsh, but in general, none of you have this. If you think you do, you're lying to yourself. It's not cheap. I know most of you. I know the petty shit, excuse my language. I know the petty stuff that you guys get hung up on and how disturbed you become by petty stuff and how much in the modes you are and how self-absorbed you ultimately are and how shallow things really run and how quick you give up your values when some shiny thing gets waved in front of your face. And so if you think, oh yeah, I do that. Yeah, no you don't. You need to learn this lesson. If I don't know you, then I'm not talking to you. So I'm only challenging and criticizing the people who I know. If I don't know you, you're exempt. But if I get to know you, I'll probably say the same thing about you. And honesty is required, introspection is required. We got to be willing to look at our lives and what we hold valuable and what we spend most of our day thinking about. Like, I personally think that everybody on a daily basis should cry in gratitude to God. Not because some bad thing happens, but just as a regular daily occurrence, you should go to a deep enough place where you're moved to tears of gratitude. Raise your hand if you do that every day. Really? I don't believe you. I think an honest assessment of the world and your situation in it should result in you regularly being moved to tears of gratitude. At your fortune for being born a human being, for being able to think about the most, we're just on this little planet somewhere in the middle of nowhere, barely hanging on to life, and we're able to plumb the depths of the universe through our power of thought that can reach out to the stars and think about the most profound things in existence. We should be grateful for that. We didn't do anything to deserve that. We're just given this mind, this body. We won the lottery times the lottery times the lottery. And then we discovered spirituality. And such a beautiful conception of divinity. These things should just trump everything else in your life. And you should be moved to chant your rounds every day, to follow the principles every day. Nothing should shake you from that. You shouldn't be willing to compromise your dignity. If you just got your head screwed on straight, there should never be a reason for you to fall down. You have to get so shallow, and you have to forget the big picture to such an extent to get wrapped up in something that makes you fall from your values. You have to just become totally myopic and totally obsessed with the moment and some transient, ephemeral feeling for a few moments. So this is something I think has a lot of value, adds a lot of value, and generally I don't find this expressed in our sacred tradition. So I was thinking about this point on my way up here, and I was thinking about how I don't generally see this expressed in our sacred tradition. And so I thought, what would be the things in our tradition, in our sacred literature, going back thousands of years for our tribe, where they were trying to communicate this idea. And I thought of the conception of time in the Vedic literatures, of yugas, and of really broad swaths of time, and reincarnation, and the idea that you've had millions of births, that there's thousands of ages that make up one day of Brahma. That Brahma himself lives 100 years, which makes up one breath of Vishnu. And the entire, 311 trillion years is the breath of Vishnu. Just the exhale. The inhale is another 311 trillion years. And these kinds of ideas of the broadness of time and unlimited lifetimes, they create a sense that there's something much bigger going on than the paltry existence you're having in this day-to-day. It's intended to give you a sense of profundity and a sense of being awestruck and being stunned by the scope and scale of the universe compared to your microscopic, myopic little teeny-weeny life and your concerns on a day-to-day basis. It's meant to rip you away from your riveting yourself to myopia, small-mindedness, petty concerns. And then it gets even bigger. Then we get concepts like mame vangsa jiva loke jiva bhuta, that the soul is an eternal fragment of God. Now, all the time in the world doesn't mean anything because you are eternal. You can't be burned or cut or divided or desiccated. You're an eternal unit of consciousness, a spark of splendor, a part of God's light. That now goes beyond time altogether and posits eternality. And that you are completely distinct from this world of matter with its constant permutations and its transience. And then, ideas like Jiva Surupoi, Krishna, that you are an eternal servant of Krishna, you have an eternal relationship with the divine, that you are like a ray of sunlight to the sun, that's your eternal connection. You are like heat and light to fire, that you're intrinsically connected to something divine. That divinity is loving and available for the price of a song, for just a turning of your consciousness, that you have the freedom to do that you're in possession of this incredible freedom to choose to turn towards divinity. And you have that freedom eternally, and you exist eternally. And then your absorption and the temporary, momentary pleasures of this world, and you're just getting spun out by the comings and goings of this world as if it's all that there is, just represents this incredible delusion, this incredible amnesia. And really just this tragic waste of your infinite potential for infinite depth. And so this idea, I think, is very powerful, to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Happiness studies and positive psychology confirm this at every step. And some awareness of your mortality and some seeing of the big picture. And we all have experience of that, where we're all wrapped up in something small and then something big happens, and we realize how unimportant that small thing was. It shocks us. So it's not even like we have to really pontificate about this and argue for it. All of you know this already. Because we all experience this. If you just are on this planet with a functioning mind, these things happen and you realize the big picture. It pulls you out of your pathos and you're wallowing in the, sewer of materialism. And you realize what's really important. And then we have this ability to think about, okay, what's really important is family, or what's really important, is whatever, my home. I almost lost my home in a fire, and it made me realize how I could get upset when my favorite TV show doesn't record. But really, I almost lost my home. But then sometimes you realize, my home is also temporary. My life is also so temporary. And I am beyond that, and I have a bigger sense of self. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger until you finally realize I'm the soul. I'm beyond time. I have a relationship with something beyond time. And then you don't sit in that. You might pay homage to that or give some kind of lip service to that, but then you go back and live in your shallow little myopic life. So we've got to figure out a way to stay in that deeper reality. And that's by thinking about big things and really being honest about where we're at, where we want to go, what's really going on, how fortunate we are on any number of levels, just to be alive, just to be able to think. And then what to speak of if we come to the idea of a soul, of a God, and so on and so forth. They're the most powerful ideas in the universe that we have access to. And then we have the ability to explore those just by turning ourselves towards it. And so what fool wouldn't spend the rest of their life every moment turning towards divinity? You, me, right here. Who's got two thumbs and is the biggest fool in the universe? And this kind of honesty and thoughtfulness and depth is curative, it's therapeutic, it's valuable. You don't know it, you need to learn it. And those ideas are actually there in our sacred texts when they talk about the eternality of the soul and the huge scopes of time and the smallness of the living entity and the greatness of God and their intrinsic relationship and your freedom to choose that. They're trying to communicate this and broaden your perspective and open your eyes. And so the thing which I held so dear that I maybe learned from Western thought or from, modern day positive psychologists and kind of cutting edge thinkers and self-help gurus and the like. It's actually there in our tradition. Our tradition is attempting to do the same thing. And tropes and ideas that we regularly encounter in our scriptures about these very, very long swaths of time, or even more eternality, or even more your intrinsic relationship to the deity, or even more the nature of the deity, or even more the idea of bhakti and the openness of bhakti and the possibility of bhakti. That's intended to make you go, oh my God, I'm so lucky. And if you can spend time cultivating that every day, which doesn't really it's not delusional. It just requires you to open your eyes and be introspective and really honest and think deeply. And this kind of stuff it's relatively simple to come to this stuff. It might not be easy, but it's simple and elegant and it's relatively straightforward, and you can get there. And a sign that you've gotten there is you're no longer struggling to not fall down. You're no longer hanging on by a thread. You're no longer barely keeping it together. You're no longer regularly dipping your toe into the abyss and having all sorts of petty concerns and getting wrapped up and losing yourself. And if you are, you're doing something really wrong. You should be able to, in a relatively short period of time, get to this place and stay there. At least enough that you're not on the verge of falling down anymore. Where you're not on the verge of not being able to keep it together anymore. Where you're solid in your values and your integrity. Because you've connected them to something higher and you're going to that high place on a regular basis. And so you can't get shallow, because if you go deep every single day, you can't get shallow in 23 hours. If you can, you didn't go that deep. You had some masturbatory fantasy about going deep, but you didn't actually go deep. Some delusional fantasy that you went deep. But otherwise, if you actually go deep on a daily basis, there's no way a day or a week is going to drag you down from that. And you'll be able to stay high forever and keep yourself on a higher level. And go through reversals and difficulties without really losing yourself in the process. Without just losing everything in the process. Without just becoming trivial. All right, I want to pack a whole hour into 20 minutes. It was 22 and a half minutes. What do you guys think? Give me a little feedback. Yeah. Last night I was journaling and being petty. I have to repeat everything you say, so make it tight.
Your class is very helpful. You just paint the picture of...
I painted a good picture, and it regulated you a little bit and put things into perspective for you, right?
Yeah.
That was my intention. That's great. It's good feedback. That's what I was trying to accomplish. What else? Damodar, what do you got for me?
I like the conception that you bring up all the time, which is that it's easy to find something that you can die for, but something that you can actually commit to and live for on a daily basis is the real struggle, but it's what's worth finding.
Thank you. Nice. Yeah.
I like the idea of going deep enough on a regular basis that you don't struggle with.
Like keeping those plates spinning, you know? You go deep enough on a regular basis, you exercise enough where you're not going to get totally out of shape in a day. If you're like, oh my God, I'm in terrible shape, and it like takes you 23 hours to get there, then you're not in good shape. You've developed enough depth where you can't just get shallow in 5 minutes. Right? And that's one of the reasons why we daily go to a deep place, is so that we eventually we're in a really deep place, and you can't get out of there in like 5 minutes, because you've gone to a deep place every day, and pretty soon you're you're years in to depth, and you're not going to get shook loose from that. You have to try to shake yourself loose from that more. Yeah.
It hit me because I'm in the middle of trying to sort out my career and finding a life partner. And I'm getting spun out.
Yeah, you're totally spun by your career and finding a life partner, and you forget, I'm a soul, Krishna loves me, I found a religion, I found a tribe, I chant japa, I have deities, I have a culture of kirtan, I'm a soul, I can connect with Krishna at every moment. And it's like, okay, maybe I have to do all this other stuff. I shouldn't be completely spun by that, because what does that show about my relationship with Krishna? That spins me out so much, right? Excellent. More? Yeah.
I like what you said about not really going deep and just having this fantasy that you're going deep.
Yeah, it's fantasy, it's masturbatory, it's delusional, it's delusions of grandeur, it's childish, right? We think we're deep, but then you're like, bro, you just fell down last week.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm in a really deep place now. No, you're not.
It's like you're mechanically chanting around, you're not really focusing and trying.
And if you go deep, you won't fall. It's just that simple. If you go deep on a regular basis, you'll never fall down. If you're falling down, you're totally blowing it. Good. More. Yes.
I like what you said about living with meaning and purpose rather than just for happiness. Because how easy it is to get those hits of dopamine, those hits of
Oxytocin.
Thank you, that
Oxycontin's another hit that people get.
Me too.
Oxycodone, Oxycontin, there's a whole bunch of oxys. I was talking about oxytocin.
It's basically that happiness boost, right? Like getting that through purpose and meaning, like that's the way to do it because everything else is fleeting. Everything else is manufactured.
People spend a lot of time talking about happiness, but we should focus more on meaning and let happiness take care of itself. Because if you got meaning, then the cheap happiness you either have or don't have isn't going to really shake you. There's something much more important.
If you're depending on those hits,
You're an addict.
you're never going to be satisfied.
You're an addict. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. More. Okay, nobody gave me the feedback I was looking for. Here's the feedback I was looking for. I mean, it was all lovely what you said. Here's the feedback I was looking for, and we'll close it with this. I took an idea which is brilliant, which gets presented in woke circles by thoughtful people, and I showed you how it's what our scriptures are trying to teach. And I took you back to things you would have heard many times over about the yuga cycles, about the eternality of the soul, about the soul being an eternal servant of Krishna, about having unlimited lifetimes, about reincarnation, about the breath of Vishnu, about the day of Brahma, about the infinitesimally small nature of the soul and the infinite nature of God, about the promise of bhakti, about Krishna being available for the price of a song. And I showed you how those ideas, which are common tropes, repeated leitmotifs in our scripture, things that every single person who's ever become a Hare Krishna has heard hundreds of times over. And I showed you how those things are actually intended to have the same effect. Somehow you guys all missed that. That was the profound part of the class. I showed you how this really cool idea is actually there in our tradition, all over our tradition. And in many ways, it's the raison d'etre of our tradition. It's the kind of like open secret. It's exactly what our tradition is trying to do. So you guys all missed that? That was the core of the class, was to breathe new life into our tradition and to show you that our tradition was talking about these really profound things in a beautiful way, in an artistic way, and in a compelling way. And that, if you want to look for this, you need to look no further than our own tradition, and we've just been missing it all along. You see that? You see that? You see that? You see that? See how that's the right feedback? Not that your feedback wasn't good, but that's the core of what I was trying to communicate. Isn't that an important point? Okay. All right, let's do a look here, Tom. Thank you so much.